So how has this whole fight against COVID-19 gone so far? What have we learned and what should we do going forward? Critical, absolutely essential. This and the election outcome, the two biggest, most important stories at this juncture in America. No question about it. We got somebody with a particular and worthy point of view on this one. He's writing a book about just what I mentioned. David Marcus, who is the New York correspondent for The Federalist. He writes thefederalist.com. He's got a book coming out on this called Charade. I can only assume that means he's actually been paying attention to all the BS we've been subjected to. David, good to see you.
Great to see you, Buck.
So let's start with this. We got Biden telling us today 100 days of masking. We got Fauci saying the same stuff that he's been saying for 9 months now, basically 8 months now. Where's your head on all of this? And you're a fellow New Yorker, so we've been through the worst of this of any place in the country. And I'm actually considering, I was just saying this before, I'm actually considering civil disobedience for the first time in my life. Like, I think I actually need to get arrested over the COVID lockdowns. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, look, it's pretty close to that. And, we saw that happen this week on Staten Island. As far as the 100-day mask mandate, I mean, according to polling, somewhere in the neighborhood of 85 or 90% of Americans are wearing masks. You walk around New York City, they're fairly ubiquitous, even beyond what the CDC has called for. We also look back to that New England Journal of Medicine article from the spring that really clearly made the point that in most quick interactions, the mask doesn't do any good. That it's sort of meaningless because you need to be having a long, like 4-minute interaction to catch it. And that got clarified by the authors, but it never got corrected. They never said, "Oh, no, that's not true." They said, "No, you should go wear your mask." So yeah, I mean, this is literally the least that Joe Biden can do.
It's amazing that so many people think this is almost a revolutionary call from the would-be next president, Joe Biden. It's almost like he's taking a page from the Fauci book, which is just keep saying the same thing, and then there's no way to gauge it one way or the other. And when it doesn't work out, then just say, well, people didn't do it well enough. Because, David, I'm looking at this now day to day. The data we set a new, it's terrible. We set a new record, unfortunately, of deaths from COVID in 24 hours in the United States. Cases over 200,000 a day confirmed this week. And I look around and I say, okay, in what world does this look like we had figured out how to stop this spread by doing all these things we've been doing? I just don't understand how anyone can come away with that conclusion.
No, I don't think you can. I mean, look, the fact is that this is an extraordinarily contagious virus. When I interviewed Dr. Slaoui for my book, who's the head of Operation Warp Speed, he explained to me that if you had a disease that was as infectious or contagious as COVID and as deadly as Ebola, he described that as something that would be an extinction level situation. I felt a little chill go up my spine, right? So, I mean, this is a very contagious disease, and you're absolutely right. Our efforts to mitigate it really haven't seemed to make a whole lot of difference. And every time the government sticks its finger in a hole in the dam, the virus starts coming through something else. So it's restaurants, or it's Thanksgiving dinner, or it's the schools, it's been hapless at best.
So in your research for Charade, you just mentioned you interviewed Dr. Slaoui. What part of this has been, let's just start with your title. What part of this do you feel has been a charade?
Well, there's a lot. A lot of it has. The book is basically broken down into chapters where I explore one myth in each of the chapters. So I think maybe the biggest lie or myth of the lockdown period was we're all in it together, right? This sort of became the advertising slogan. This sort of became the way that politicians made us feel that we couldn't disobey them, or we were somehow harming the collective, and we were all going through it. And obviously we weren't. I mean, I was very aware of the privileged position that I was in, being a journalist who had basically already worked from home. That I kept my income, right? I even got the stimulus money. And meanwhile, I'd walk to the grocery store and see food lines. We were never in this together. Another is, follow the science. And as we just talked about with the mess, well, I mean, the science changes. Jay Bhattacharya, who's a Stanford professor of medicine at Stanford, he made the point recently that science can't operate if you have what I like to refer to as pandemic correctness. Science can only operate if everybody's ideas are able to be explored. And that clearly didn't happen. We saw that with that New England Journal of Medicine article where they were scolded and then they were cowed.
Yeah, I got throttled on social media for sharing the Danish mask study because you're only allowed to share it. And remember, now they actually will shut you down for things because they claim it lacks context, which is just a fancy way of saying we don't like your editorial bent on this. Even if it's accurate, we don't like your conclusions. So we're going to say that it's not fair enough or something like this to the data, even though it's sharing actual data. So I've had to go through that, which has been quite a truly Orwellian experience. People overuse that term, but it actually does apply here. And I just think that in New York City in particular, and some of these large urban areas across the country, David, there's been an unwillingness to question any of this because I do believe it just got wrapped up in anti-Trumpism. And now I know there's still this election recount lawsuits and all this going on, but every Democrat I know thinks, and I know a whole bunch of them, thinks that Joe Biden is the president and this is all a joke. And they kind of look at me like, okay, so now you're going to stop pointing out the hypocrisy with the lockdowns when people who are, as you mentioned, the elites aren't affected by this. We're not in this together. They are literally sending stay at home, don't see anybody orders from their vacation spots in Mexico, as the mayor of Austin did, right? Like, don't go anywhere. I'm flying private to Mexico. I point this out still, and some of them are looking at me like, well, no, but this isn't about Trump anymore. And I'm looking at them and saying, exactly. It was never actually about Trump, you lunatics. Yeah. Although I usually leave the lunatics part out.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. We'd be very lucky if this was about Trump. My fear is that this is less about Trump and more about people like Emperor Cuomo getting a taste of absolute power and deciding, hey, this tastes pretty good. And I still have an excuse to tell people that, now for 10 months, I have to operate under the emergency powers that were given to me by the state legislature. That's happening all over the country. By the way, that's happening by the same people who accuse Trump of being a authoritarian. I mean, what's going on?
Yeah, it can't be all these things. We're speaking of David Marcus, who is the New York correspondent for The Federalist. He writes at thefederalist.com. So, David, what do you think is coming? I mean, I made a prediction. I've been making a prediction that you're going to see if the Biden mask mandate, which, I mean, you can't fly right now without a mask. They will actually not fly, and they will boot you off the airline permanently. That's what they threaten to do to people. And they've actually done it, I think, a few times now if you don't mask up. So it's just adding to this. But my belief is that they're going to try to have this renewed sense of lockdown. And I mean that with the stay-at-home orders and the masking alongside vaccine distribution. And then, as if we're all a bunch of idiots, they're going to turn around and say, in right around March, when the cases, God willing, I think they will, are cratering and everything's working, they'll say, see, yeah, the vaccine was kind of helpful, but it was really all those Fauci-esque orders that got it done. I think that's what's going to happen.
It may well. And look, part of the reason that I wanted to write the book is because the history is already so skewed and so wrong about what's happened that I believe you're right, that'll continue to be the case. The very first chapter, the very first myth that I bust in this book is this idea that January and February were wasted months by the Trump administration, that they just weren't doing anything. And then all of a sudden in March, and it's an absolute fabrication. As Alex Azar pointed out just the other day, it was January 9th when the NIH started working with Moderna on a vaccine. To put that in perspective, that's before China admitted that there had been a single death. That's before the World Health Organization said that there was human-to-human contact. And that is why we have that particular vaccine today. So, and that was the story, right? How often did you hear that? Oh, well, Trump didn't do anything in January and February. The media just repeated it, and it's a blatant lie, an
I was
provable
on the Bill
blatant
Maher
lie.
show in February, as this audience knows, and was laughed at and sneered at by that audience, which happens if you're a conservative. Doesn't matter who you are, what you do. That's what. Then unfortunately, that's the deal. But you got to go into the lion's den sometimes. And it was because they had already decided that Trump had failed, and this was before a single American had died from COVID. He was already a catastrophic failure on COVID. So it was all baked in before anything even happened. It didn't matter. And I think that, tragically, unfortunately, from a political perspective, I think it was largely effective. I mean, this should not have even been a close election if it weren't for COVID. And here we are still counting ballots.
Well, look, I think the news that just broke about Nancy Pelosi is just about the most horrible thing I can imagine a politician doing. I mean, she just announced this morning that now, because Biden is going to be president, she'll accept a smaller stimulus package. I mean, millions of people have been suffering who need that money, millions of businesses who need that support. And the fact that she's just blatantly admitting that the only reason that she wouldn't do it was because she wanted Joe Biden to be president. I mean, lie to me, right? Tell me it's because cases are spiking. Say anything else. Don't blatantly tell me that you plunged people into misery for the sake of winning an election. It's a shocking admission.
Do you think New York has had, is it fair, or what would be your calculation about whether we could say New York specifically has had the worst leadership? We've certainly had the worst outcomes, but is it fair to say we've had the worst leadership during the COVID outbreak?
I don't know, man. I was in Chicago last week, and my understanding is that those kids haven't been back in school at all, and that it's basically like all remote, at least for the public schools. Their restaurants are closed, and man, November in Chicago trying to eat a steak outside under a heat lamp, that's just about over. I was able to manage it, but that's just about done, right? So that's been pretty bad. As you mentioned, Garcetti has been bad. Newsom hasn't. Look, it's a competitive category, but I'm like you. I always want to give New York number one, so we can give it number one with an asterisk,
yeah.
I guess.
But I agree with you. Garcetti, I love that with Garcetti, he has said, the quote is cancel everything, but podcasting, which is near and dear to my heart, podcasting is an essential activity. So if you have to leave your home or take some risks for that one, okay, good to know. Because he's got buddies, he's got celebrity friends that want to keep doing their podcasts and go into their studios. David Marcus, he's got a book. When's it coming out, David?
It comes out in March, but it's available for pre-order at all the, Amazons and Barnes and Noble, all the companies that are taking over the world and stomping their foot on small business. So, I wouldn't blame anyone for waiting to try to buy it at a bookstore, but it'll be out in March.
There we go. David Marcus of the Federalist, everyone. David, thanks so much, man. Have a good one.
Thanks for having me.
With travel being as challenging and as concerning as it is for so many people these days, you know that it's not really going to be a normal holiday season. You're not going to see everybody you want to see. That's just the way it's probably going to be for a lot of folks across the country, right? A lot of challenges. But you can still send the people who matter to you something that'll really brighten their day, cheer them up, bring them some holiday joy. Go with Bloomsy Box. That's what I've done. I've got Bloomsy Box flowers right now sent to my girlfriend. You can have them sent to members of your family. Anyone you can't see, reach out and touch them with beautiful flowers. They're incredible. Bloomsy Box are simply better blooms. The look on your family or friend's face when they get their Bloomsy Box flowers arrive, it's all worth it. Whether I'm sending a single holiday arrangement or a subscription for someone special to receive flowers each month, I only send Bloomsy Box. I got you a special discount, too. Go to bloomsybox.com, enter code BUCK for 15% off and free shipping. That's promo code BUCK at Bloomsybox, BLOOMSY, bloomsybox.com, promo code BUCK. Joe Biden now, every couple of days, says something where the only reasonable reaction is to go, huh? What? Or maybe to go, womp, womp. What was that Joe Biden just said? Somebody want to try to explain it or make sense of it? he was asked in this complete puff piece interview with fake Jake Tapper, and I don't know if he was the only one doing the interview. Who cares? He was asked with this because CNN now, they are state TV for the Democrats. That's the way this is going to work. Here's Biden talking about his disagreements in the past. Rather, he was being asked about this, his disagreements with Kamala Harris. And I want you to listen very closely to what he says. Play 2.
It's a matter of the thing. We are simpatico on our philosophy of government and simpatico on how we want to approach these issues that we're facing. And so I don't have, and when we disagree, it'll be just like, so far it's been just like when Barack and I did. It's in private. She'll say, I think we should do A, B, C, or D. And I'll say, I like A, don't like B and C. Mm-hmm. And let's go, okay. And I told Barack, if I reach something where there's a fundamental disagreement we have based on a moral principle, I'll develop some disease and say I have to resign. We don't have that. We haven't, and we discussed at length our views on foreign policy, on domestic policy, on intelligence. And the great thing is she has a background in the Senate on intelligence, the Intelligence Committee. She has a background in the Senate on a whole range of things that are going to be pertinent to what we have to do. But it's going to be, I think so much is going to be incoming, Jake. Yeah. It's a matter about who takes what when.
I don't know. I know it was in the middle there, so I just want to reiterate it. You hear him, I'll develop some disease and resign. That's what Joe Biden just said. I will develop some disease and resign. You heard the audio yourself. What the heck is that? If I have a disagreement with Kamala on a core principle, I'll develop a disease and resign. Now, I understand that people are going to say, oh, he was just Biden being Biden, all this. I said it from the beginning. This guy is not going to finish his 4 years in office. He will step down. Another prediction. We'll be able to check on this in time. And I know it's not over yet with the election, but they're moving forward acting like it is, so we can at least have a conversation about this. They are going to, they're going to tell you that this is crazy. Meanwhile, Joe Biden's actually saying out loud stuff like, I'm going to develop a health issue and resign. In an interview on TV. It wasn't like he said it in a open mic moment somewhere. People would say hot mic. I think that's not. Producer Mark, is it a hot mic when it makes the weird sound? Do you know what I mean?
No, a mic is hot when it's on.
Is that really true?
Yes, that's a technical inside baseball type of term.
No, but I thought hot mic meant that it's makes the noise and stuff that, it's
no, that's called feedback.
Well, this is why producer Mark runs that stuff. So, okay, fair enough. Well, then I guess I'm on a hot mic. So yeah. Anyway, the point is Joe Biden's saying this now. He's saying, I'm going to develop something and I'm going to step down. Of course he would want to do that. He gets to be, if you look at Joe Biden's career, and I hate having to say this guy is a deeply unimpressive mediocrity at best. And he has the opportunity to be the vice president to the first black president and the president who then brought in and prepared and handed the torch over to the first black female president, of the, and both Democrats, of course, Barack and Kamala. And what could be a better legacy for Joe Biden? The Biden name will be better than the Kennedy name. I'm telling you, this is the play. You don't want Joe Biden. If we have to go to war with China or something, Joe Biden doesn't want to be in charge. He'd be like, China, no joke, man. Big country, lots of people. I'm gonna develop something and step down. Right? That's what we're signing up for here, America. Get ready for it. I recently took a crash course in home title theft, and look, you better make sure this crime never happens to you because it comes after your most valuable asset, your home. Here's how it works. The bad guys, cyber thieves, they find your home's title online. Then they use a quitclaim deed to kick you off, put themselves on. Then they take out loans against the equity in your home. A lot of people find out about this when they get payment demands in the mail or even a foreclosure notice. The usual identity theft services don't protect you. You have to go with the experts I trust at Home Title Lock. They can create a virtual barrier around your home's title. All you have to do is go to HomeTitleLock.com, use the promo code RADIO. That'll get you 30 free days of protection, and you can check online to see if you're a victim of this crime and don't even know it yet. HomeTitleLock.com, promo code RADIO. That will get you 30 free days of protection. Plus, you can check online to see if you're a victim of home title theft and don't yet know it. HomeTitleLock.com, promo code RADIO. So we got this battle over the election still playing out, and we also have the fight against COVID happening, the two biggest stories in the country right now. And who better to talk to about both of those things at this point in time than my friend John Cardillo, formerly of the NYPD. He's a conservative commentator, TV and radio host. John, how you doing down there in Florida?
Doing pretty well. You know, we're in a red state here. We did pretty well in November, despite the insanity, and things are relatively open. You know, down here in South Florida, the bluer counties, Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach, still some restrictions, but by and large, we're back to business as usual.
It's amazing, isn't it? Because up in New York, we're just getting, it's like the boa constrictor of the state is just squeezing and squeezing more every day.
Yeah.
But the cases keep going up. And I keep pointing down to what's happening in Florida and saying to everybody, well, why is it that New York is worse off than Florida? They have more seniors overall in Florida they do in New York, who are the greatest at-risk population, particularly over 70. And yet we're told, oh, we have to just do more. I mean, you're in a situation, John, down there where Governor DeSantis seems to be actually putting on a clinic for other governors of how to handle this. It's not perfect, but it's sane.
Yeah, look, he's basically handed out a mandate that says these local petty tyrants, they can enact their own local rules, in line with what's historically and legally sound, but they can't engage in these draconian finings of businesses or send the police in to shut them down. So DeSantis has essentially neutered them, for lack of a better choice of words, these local officials who just, you know what it is, Buck? You know this. You and I have spoken about it online, on social media, and offline, right? It's local officials who just want to exercise that little bit of power they have. And if they can crush a business or ruin a kid's experience at school or tell you can't have 10 people in your house, that's where DeSantis stepped in. He said, enough of this nonsense. We're not going to put up with this in Florida. So he's really taken the teeth away from them. So, for example, down here, they can no longer fine a business. If a business allows me to walk in without a mask on, sure, it's still against these arbitrary and capricious rules, but they can't fine me. The business can't be fined. They can't come in and shut the business down. Now, the problem is that's as it pertains to COVID and these mask rules. So what the little petty tyrants on the local level are doing is they're saying to the business owner, well, maybe we can't fine you or shut you down, but hey, the governor's order doesn't prevent us from sending in the health department and the fire department and the code inspectors. So they're still harassing these businesses that are operating legally. No one is dropping dead in the streets. It is sickening. It is sickening tyranny, Buck. That's all it is.
Wow, there's local level bureaucratic harassment. I should have expected that. And, John,
never heard of it, right?
Yeah, we had here in Staten Island, up in NYC, we had Max Bar and Restaurant that was the site of this protest, and you got the owners, and I've spoken to the lawyers representing them. I thought it was so interesting, and the lawyer, particularly when I talked to him for the owners of the restaurant, so interesting that Max Public House, these guys that are sent in are sheriffs, not NYPD. Classic.
Yeah, man. Let me tell you something. Out of all the time I spent with NYPD, I think I saw 2 New York City sheriff vehicles. I don't think I ever once interacted with a New York City sheriff. They were around. They had these red and white cars at the time, but I never interacted with them. We would interact with New York City marshals, those guys who are appointed by the mayor and they do repossessions of vehicles and evictions. You'd see them out there. We'd get called to back them up sometime. But I don't remember once, and I was in a high crime area of the Bronx, ever coming across the New York City sheriff's office. I don't
think I've ever. I mean, I worked for the NYPD, as you know, John, for a little while, not as long as you did, and I've lived in New York for over 30 years. I don't think I've ever seen a sheriff before. So
thank you. Exactly. Yeah.
It's amazing. But of course, if you're going to bring somebody in to do something like that, I almost understand that at some level. It's like, don't stain the NYPD, which you're really going to need, by sending them in. They told me they sent in 20 guys, John, 20 guys to one bar for the crime of serving burgers and beer, when 2 blocks away, there were other restaurants that could serve burgers and beer, but they were in the wrong zone.
Yeah, like the orange zone or the autonomous. First of all, this is all dystopian craziness that we now have zones where we have no-go zones in American cities. And look, you talked earlier when you opened the show about cases. I want to see a lot of cases. We see a lot of cases of the common cold. We saw a lot of cases of the flu before it got COVID and died. There's no flu anymore, apparently. What is wrong with seeing cases where the mortality rate goes into these fractions of decimilic percentages? Everyone should want that. But the left is now using that as a way to grab more power and to say, we got to shut you down. And look, Buck, I believe, and I'm not a conspiratorial guy, but this is achieving an objective they've always wanted, which is crushing the private sector and making people dependent upon government. And, if you're a person that distrusts government, you might think, they're hyping this up a little bit to bring more power to themselves.
And you see this also, John, where the small businesses, I was actually stunned. I did a deep dive into it on my own earlier this week, because the media, they have access to this data. The numbers are out there. When you see businesses, not that temporarily closed, but that are believed to have shut down permanently in major cities, talking about small businesses, so not, national chains and not the big box stores, individually owned businesses, the numbers are already, and we're about to go into this winter of, 100 days of masking that Biden's saying and everything else, 30%, John, 40%. In some places, New Orleans looks like it's getting closer to 50%. This is, I can't even estimate off the top of my head how many thousands, tens of thousands of people whose life's work. I mean, if you're a sole proprietor, if you're a guy who owns a small business or a gal who owns a small business, and it goes away, you've built that brand, you've built that neighborhood community tie. It's just gone now because people like DeBlasio and Garcetti and Lightfoot and you name it feel like it's too dangerous.
And they all get guaranteed paychecks on your dime. So you're paying for them to put you out of business, to take your family's livelihood, to take everything you've ever worked for. Their paychecks keep coming, right? And, go back to Florida now. One of the very fortunate byproducts of Ron DeSantis being conservative and proactive on this is that where I live in Fort Lauderdale, there's Las Olas Boulevard, the main drag with bars and restaurants. Only one well-known place went out of business permanently because of COVID. One on that strip. And it was one of those that was about a 7 or 8 chain place in Florida. And they were starting to fall off anyway as new places opened. But fortunately, the governor here, Ron DeSantis, stepped in quickly enough to save a lot of these mom and pops. And we're noticing it. My neighborhood's coming back very strong now. These guys only have, Buck, this, they only have maybe 30, 60, tops 90 days of operating cash reserve. They can't afford to do this. Their employees are going broke. The owners are going broke. The landlords that rely on those rents to sustain the properties and pay the property taxes. I mean, the effect of this is devastating. So thankfully, there are some governors that get it.
And I know we're in an emergency, but people don't want to even have to think about this right now. But with economics, with monetary policy, there's always cause and effect. Trillions of dollars, John, that we're spending this year. We're going to spend trillions more next year to try to undo the damage that the trillions we spent this year was unable to do. So that's something I'm very worried about. We're speaking to John Cardillo, ex-NYPD and now conservative commentator. He's down in Florida. Luckily for him, he's not here in the dystopia of the 5 boroughs under de But let's switch gears for a second, John, to what we saw in Georgia. I mean, we could focus in on that, right? There's a lot of stuff we could talk about. You and I have both seen everything the president said on the election fraud. We're seeing all the tweets. We're seeing the legal team. I know you're in contact with them. I'm in contact with them.
Yeah.
I mean, Georgia, to me, it's like, well, they got people on video with briefcases or suitcases full of ballots that after hours, at a minimum, I mean, if you were doing an investigation back in the day for the PD, wouldn't this be like justification for a warrant? Wouldn't this be something you'd say, oh, I think we got something?
Yeah, it's funny. So literally 30 seconds before you and I started this interview, I was chatting. I was texting with a couple of mutual friends of ours, guys like Ned Ryan and Kurt Schlichter and Jim Hansen. And I said exactly that to them. I said, hey, we've all been doing a real good job, you included, of debunking a lot of these crazy conspiracy theories around voter fraud, these CIA and Delta shootouts in Germany. I mean, this stuff is crazy, right? But I said, hey, as former law enforcement, what we're now seeing in Georgia, that to me anyway is probable cause. I would have no problem as an investigator now going to an assistant district attorney or a state attorney general and assistant state attorney general and saying, hey, look, we've got something here. Give us the subpoenas we need. Give us the warrants we need. Let's go take a look. Let's get some people in the interview room. Let's start talking to people because this sure looks bad. I personally think, I'm not familiar with Georgia law, but the probable cause standard is pretty uniform across the country, that now Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, should have done it last night, order the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, their state investigators, a top-notch agency, very talented investigators, order them to make this their priority and find out what in the world happened. I'm with you. I think we've got enough evidence now to launch a full-blown criminal investigation.
And there should be no problem here. I mean, if you were a person,
Right.
if you're one of the people captured on this video, wouldn't you want to just say, well, no, I mean, here's what we did, right? It's very, either there's something shady going on or there's not. And they should want to be able to clear themselves right away. But I also think it's fun. I know bringing up the media, John, it's the media we've got, right? I mean, you live in America with the media we have. I wish we could change it. We can't, but it doesn't mean I'm going to let them get away with stuff like this. Could you imagine if there was a video of what were believed to be, Republicans, perhaps pro-Trump people after hours doing this? Every single person in that video would already be named. They would have news crews out in front of their homes. They'd be saying, what did you do? What's going on? They'd create this frenzy. And instead, we just have these grainy videos. And it's like, those are just poll workers doing what they do. No big deal. The media has no interest.
Yeah, I mean, look, we had 15 FBI agents show up at a NASCAR garage because of a rope to pull down the garage door. They've got video evidence of voter fraud. And this is just now, let's say video evidence of alleged what perceives to be voter fraud or election fraud or even theft of data for whatever reason. But like you say, get these people in an interview room and find out whether it was something they were supposed to do. Maybe the protocol was for these workers to take the disks and the hard drives and this paper and store it this way and transport it this way. And if that's the case, there'll be a paper trail of that. But if it's not, then it's going to beg more investigation. And real last point, look, every investigation, this from your time with PD, is about a timeline. We need to be investigating what happened on election night criminally. Those timelines, investigations with teeth, with warrant power, with subpoena power, as to why, when doors were supposed to be closed and the lights turned out, things were still going on. And that's when those votes for Biden were miraculously showing up. Now, could it be legitimate? I don't think it is. But let's break down the timeline and account for every second, what happened in every second. This is the presidential election. This is the heart and soul of this republic. We need to account for every one of those seconds.
You're still in this fight till the end, John?
I am. Look, I'm a pragmatist. I know this is tough. We've got to hit 15 shots from the outside. We've got to hit 15 3-pointers and hit everyone perfectly without hitting the rim. And that's a tough hill to climb. But I think we need to do it. We need to let it run its course. But at the same time, Buck, we need to also expose fraud if there was. I believe there was, simultaneous to electing the Republicans in Georgia. I don't care what you think about Perdue and Loeffler. We cannot afford to lose the Senate. If you live in Georgia, get out there, vote. Do not let America wake up to a majority leader, Chuck Schumer.
Absolutely. And I want everyone to have the same mindset here about Georgia. And if we find fraud, even if it's insufficient, if we find that there were 1,000 votes changed somewhere, we should know what happened and how it happened, because
that's right.
Margins in the Georgia Senate election could be very, very narrow, and we don't want to go through that. We don't want to have this nonsense where the media pretends that there's no reason to ask these questions. John Cardillo, everybody. John, stay tanned, ready, and rested down there in Florida, my friend. Good of you to join us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I can't wait to see you down here and grab dinner, Buck. Great talking to you.
Absolutely. You take care, buddy. You better get ready for a mainstream media that is going to just embarrass itself every day with the virtual back rub they will be giving Joe Biden, the Joe Biden administration. It'll be a shiatsu, a Swedish style, hot stone, whatever they want. That's what's going to end up happening every day. And who better to kick off that tradition than fake Jake Tapper, who's like, Joe Biden, just how's it feeling right now? This is where they're really speaking truth to power, folks. Play 8.
You've been in public life for more than half a century. This was
as a kid. Yep.
Your third run for president, and you made it. You made it. What does it feel like, especially at this moment when this nation is in any number of crises, including the COVID crisis? What does it feel like? Are you daunted? Are you worried? Are you fearful? Are you exhilarated? What's the emotion that goes through you?
I'm determined, and I'm confident that what I've said from the outset, I've never changed my view. This whole campaign for over almost going on 600 days, exactly what had to be done. We have to restore the soul of this country, meaning honor, decency, honesty, basic, fundamental decency. The second thing, we have to rebuild the backbone of this country, the middle class. That in this time bring everybody along. And thirdly, we have to unite the country. They're all going to be difficult to do, but I've never veered from those three principles.
Yeah, that's right. The Democrats, the party that spent 3 years lying about the president and his supporters, saying they were white nationalists and fascists and pawns of the Kremlin, and that were excusing this past summer mobs of maniacs throwing bottles of urine and rocks and shooting lasers into eyes of police officers. Now they're all about decency. Now they're all about honor. Sure they are. But fake Tapper knows this is great for him. Oh my gosh, all these lib journos, now they get back near the seat of power. They don't want to speak truth to power. They want to give a foot rub to power. They want to be close buddies with power. It advances their careers. It fattens their paychecks. It makes them feel more important. Makes their day-to-day work easier, right? They're just going to be scribes, propagandists, if in fact Joe Biden becomes the president. So get ready for it. I mean, it couldn't be any more obvious. We already see this happening in front of our very eyes, but doesn't mean we have to be okay with it. It's appalling. But journalism in this country is it's not a real thing anymore. It hasn't been a real thing for a long time. We have essentially information warfare machines taking different political positions. That's what journalism is.